Okay, so the first lesson is integers, and those are just positive and negative numbers. And I think as people learn them in elementary school and grade school, it still is thought of adding and subtracting, and essentially it is, but it's time to kind of shift your mind over to the idea of just combining. We're putting these together, and so instead of thinking in terms of an operation that would be adding or subtracting, just start to think in terms of what kind of numbers are you actually combining? Are they positive or negative? So the key is really to understand what these mean. And again, I'm sure you all do. I'm sure you've seen positive and negative numbers before, but it's important to kind of get a grip on the big picture. So I just have a few different examples here. So if I had negative 7 minus 4, what that really is I had a negative 7, I combined it with 4 more negatives. So now I have 11 negatives. I could also look at it like this. Here are my 7 negatives. Here are my 4 more negatives. That gives me my 11 negatives. So those are two negative numbers that I put together. Here is 3 plus 10. Well, that's pretty straightforward. I had a positive 3, and then I got 10 more positives. Same thing here, 3 positives. I combined it with 10 other positives, and now I have 13 positives. Where it sometimes gets a little bit more complicated, or where people tend to make more frequent mistakes, is when you start to have a mix of the two signs. So I'm going to think, instead of thinking negative 7 plus 11, I'm going to think I am combining a negative 7 and a positive 11. So if I have a negative 7 and then I combine it with a positive 11, I'm going this way, and I'm going to end up here at positive 4. Same thing here. Here are my 7 negatives and my 11 positives. All these that have a match basically cancel out each other. So it's really, what do I have left? Well, 4 positives. So you'll notice when I did these, when I combine a negative 7 and a negative 4, I ended up with a negative number that was bigger than both. When I combined a positive 3 and a positive 10, I ended up with a positive number that was bigger than both. When I combined a negative and a positive, I ended up with a number that was somewhere in the middle of the two, and then I just took the sign of the bigger number. If I do here, when I look at this, my immediate reaction, based on years and years and years of habit, is to just say 3 minus 8. I'm going to take a pause and think to myself, I have a positive 3 and a negative 8. So I am combining a positive 3 with a negative 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm ending up here at negative 5, which you could see is somewhere in the middle of those two numbers. You may have learned in grade school the idea of like changing the negative to a positive and changing the sign of the second number, or some rule like that. We want to get away from that, and again, just think, what kind of numbers do you actually have rather than what operation is there. The only time you're ever going to change a sign is if you come up with this situation right here. Two negatives right next to each other with no number in between. This sort of goes with the rule that like two negatives make a positive. I mean, I could think about this as 2 minus the opposite of 6, but I wouldn't even know how to begin to do that. So when you are here in this situation, that's when you can change. So those two negatives become a positive. Now when I do this, I'm still going to go back and think, what kind of number do I have? I have a positive 2 and a positive 6. So a positive 2 and then 6 more positives would get me to 8. Then I'm going to do the same thing here. Two negatives make a positive. I have a negative 9 and a positive 5. So negative 9, 5 in the positive direction, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I end up with negative 4. You could see again, because I had two different signs, I ended up with a number somewhere in the middle of those two numbers. So that kind of leads me to the rules that are very important to understand when it comes to combining integers. The idea of same sign sum. You just add the two numbers together and keep whatever sign they came with. So when you have two negatives, you're putting those together. You should get a number that's bigger than either two numbers you started with, and then the same sign that the numbers already were. Same with adding. Different sign difference. That's when you have a positive and a negative. Doesn't matter which is bigger, doesn't matter which is first. You just take the difference of those two numbers. Then you keep the sign of the bigger number. So that's again, we had a -9 and a +5. The difference of 9 and 5 is 4, no matter what. And then since 9 was negative and that was bigger than 5, that's why my answer would be -4. The reason I've spent more time on the combining is because it's just more complicated. Multiplying and dividing is a lot more straightforward. So basically, if you have an even number of negative signs, your answer is going to be positive when you're multiplying, dividing, or you have a mix of those two operations. Again, two negatives make a positive, but as we move forward, you might have more than two numbers that you have to look at. So count up your negative signs. Even number of negative signs, 2, 4, 6, whatever, your answer is positive. An odd number of negative signs, 1, 3, 5, whatever, your answer will be negative. And you just do all of your multiplying and dividing like you normally would, following your order of operations. So looking at a few examples. And again, I'm going to kind of belabor the process a little bit just to show again how you want to start thinking. So in terms of this, I'm going to think I have a +4 and a -8. Well, that's different sign difference. The difference between 8 and 4 is 4, but since 8 is negative, and that's the bigger number, my answer is negative. I have a +3 and a +3. Very straightforward. That is 6. Same sign sum. Again, my eyes are just going to see this as 10 minus 7. And we all know that's 3. But I'm still going to take the time to get in the habit to say I have a +10 and a -7. Different sign difference. Take the sign of the bigger number. I have a -6 and a +2. Different sign difference. The difference between 6 and 2 is 4. 6 is the bigger number and it's negative, so my answer is negative. Here I have a -3 and a -5. Same sign sum. So I'm adding these two together and keeping the sign. Because I had 3 negatives, I got 5 more negatives, now I have 8 negatives. I have a +3 and a -5. Different sign difference. The difference between 3 and 5 is 2. The bigger number is negative, so my answer is negative. +4, +2, same sign sum. Answer still positive. +8, -3. Different sign difference. The difference is 5. The bigger number is positive, so the answer is positive. -5, +4. Different sign difference. The difference is 1. The bigger number is negative, so my answer is negative. -4, -6. Same sign sum. The sum of 4 and 6 is 10, and since they're both negative, the answer is negative. +2, -6. Different sign difference. The difference is 4. The bigger number is negative, so the answer is negative. +5, +4, same sign sum, 9. +9, -6. Different sign difference. The difference is 3, and the bigger number is positive. -8, +7. Different sign difference. The difference is 1. The bigger number is negative, so the answer is negative. -2, -8. Same sign sum. The sum is 10. They're both negative, so the answer is negative. So that's basically combining. Again, very important to start shifting your thinking away from adding and subtracting and start thinking more in terms of what kind of numbers am I trying to combine, positive, negative, and follow those rules of same sign sum, different sign difference. Once you get to multiplication and division, again, it's a lot more straightforward. You just multiply the numbers like you normally would. 2 times 5 is 10. How many negative signs do I have? 1. Well, that's an odd number of negatives, so my answer is negative. 18 divided by 6 is 3. How many negative signs do I have? 2. Well, 2 negatives make a positive. 2 is an even number of negative signs, so my answer is actually positive. 3 times 5 is 15. 15 times 2 is 30. And 30 times 4 is 120. So I multiply all the numbers like I normally do. 15 times 2 is 30. 30 times 4 is 120. Now I'm counting up the negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a positive number of negatives. Really, these 2 negatives made a positive. These 2 numbers made a positive. My answer is positive. Then I'm going to do this. I'm multiplying the numerator first. 2 times 10 is 20. 20 times 3 is 60. Divided by negative 5. Well, 60 divided by 5 is 12. And I have 1 negative. That's an odd number of negatives, so my answer is negative. So again, just be sure to keep shifting your mind between the 2 sets of operations. Again, addition and subtraction, combining, that kind of has its own set of rules. The rules for multiplying and dividing are a different set of rules. Then you have to still kind of shift around between what kind of numbers do I have. Same signs you have to add, different signs you have to find the difference. So there is a lot to keep track of. So when you're doing this work, the best thing to do is just slow yourself down and really just keep talking to yourself. The more you keep repeating those processes and the rules, the more they'll just become a natural part of how you think. So that is a wrap on the instructions for integers, and carry on and ask any questions that you need to.